headlines here this evening. The big one that I wanted to get to, because admittedly I kind of put it on the back burner last week thinking, okay, we'll get to it, and I never got to it, was Adrian Peterson, the Adrian Peterson situation. Now, earlier this week, NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell announced that Adrian Peterson had been suspended for the remainder of the 2014 season and wouldn't be reinstated earlier than April 15th. Last night, Adrian broke his silence. I got this off my phone on the Bleacher Report Team Stream app. Minnesota Vikings running back Adrian Peterson has remained largely quiet about the child abuse scandal involving him and his 4-year-old son. After NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell suspended Peterson for the remainder of the 2014 season on Tuesday, the 6-time Pro Bowler has opened up about the troubling off-field saga. USA Today's Tom Pelissero conducted an exclusive interview with Peterson, whose prior quietness on the case has put his football career on hold, and no one knows how. Let's see here. Okay, so this is actually Adrian saying, "No one knows how I felt when I turned my child around after spanking him and seeing what I had left on his leg. No one knows that Dad sat there and apologized to him, hugged him, and told him that I didn't mean to do this to you, and how sorry I was. I love my son, I love my kids, my family. Like I said, after I took the misdemeanor plea, I take full responsibility for my actions. I regret the situation. I love my son more than any one of you could ever imagine." Goodell said in part of his statement that he felt Peterson showed no meaningful remorse for his actions. That was something Peterson addressed directly in the interview. Ultimately, I know I'll have my opportunity to sit down with Roger face to face, and I'll be able to say a lot of the same things that I've said to you. Don't say that I'm not remorseful, because in my statement I showed that I was remorseful. I regretted everything that took place. I love my child more than anyone could ever imagine. After not attending a disciplinary hearing prior to his official suspension and generating controversy in doing so, Peterson issued a statement explaining his reasons for the no-show. That was something Peterson addressed again in his remarks to USA Today. "I didn't want to go into a situation blind," said Peterson. "I didn't know what to expect, what's going to be there, who will I be meeting with, what the details we're going to get into." Peterson, who is appealing his suspension, also said that he would never use a switch again to discipline his children, referencing alternative ways that he could exact discipline. Peterson was indicted on a felony charge on September 11th and then pleaded no contest to a misdemeanor child injury charge on November 4th. Sports Illustrated's Peter Bukowski weighed in on Pelissero's incisive piece, and I'm not even going to get into that part, but basically, Adrian answered a lot of questions that people were wondering, and were wondering why he wasn't answering earlier. And to that, I'm sure Rusty Hardin, his lawyer, probably had some interference in there, probably advised Peterson to kind of stay away from doing that until the legal process had played out. But I think Adrian made a huge mistake in not getting out in front of this and issuing an apology and issuing a statement, at least a statement, earlier.
Right. Originally, you have to take him at his word. If he's remorseful, he's remorseful. But of course, like you said, he lawyered up, and a lot of those statements sound like they came probably right from his lawyer. But you have to take him at his word that he understands what he did wrong. And the other part of that story that just came out in the last couple of days is Adrian Peterson about his future with the Vikings too, where he says, "Well, I don't know if the people of Minnesota will accept me, or I'll be back." Not that he has a lot of control on where he plays, next year.
Yeah, in fact, actually, I just dug this up too. So he did say that I would have to get back to my community. This is as far as whether or not he would love to go back and play for Minnesota. He said, "I would love to go back and play in Minnesota to get a feel and just see if my family still feels comfortable there. But if there's word out that, hey, they might release me, then so be it. I would feel good knowing that I've given everything I had in me. I would have to get back in the community and get a feel. I know who loves me, the coaches and the players. It's not going to be a problem. I felt so much support for those guys. From those guys, the organization, I know there's people in the organization that support me, and there's people that I know internally that has not been supporting me. So kind of hints right there that there are people probably close to the Vikings organization, in the Vikings organization, that haven't been supporting him, and at least, a little bit, he's kind of exploring, the option, at least in his mind, of going to play elsewhere. It should also be noted that this news just broke today. The hearing on AP's appeal of his suspension is scheduled for December 2nd, according to ESPN. I'm not a great legal mind, but from all the other people who are talking about it on TV and on the radio, it sounds like there is a very slim chance at best that appeal is going to actually hold up, and his ruling is going to be overturned.
Yeah, it looks like next year. And I guess what do you, as a Viking fan, or maybe I know you're from the area, is there a feeling amongst Viking fans?
Well, no, there's
there's
a misconception. There's a misconception among NFL fans, and I guess specifically Vikings fans too, that you have to go to one side or the other. That you either side with Adrian Petertson and you defend him and you defend the fact that he was raised that way, so he was exacting punishment on his child the way that he himself was punished. There's a misconception that you either have to side that way or side with the NFL. And me personally, I think both were in the wrong. I think what Adrian Petertson did was heinous. I think he deserved to be punished. And I think at the end of the day, there's only one person that Adrian Petertson can blame for what's happened, and that's Adrian Petertson. But at the same time, I think the NFL continually gets it wrong when trying to enforce punishment, enforce rules. First of all, I don't understand why it takes the NFL over a week to rule on AP after the legal process had played out. It wasn't unexpected. This pleading down to a misdemeanor, this was in the works, and the NFL, I mean, they're a billion-dollar company. I don't understand why they can't have someone kind of already figuring out what they want to do when it actually happens. Basically, okay, if we go down this road, if he doesn't take the plea, if he decides to try this thing, okay, this is how we're going to handle it. If he decides to plead, this is how we're going to handle it. And then you can have a few forks in the road. Well, if he pleads to this, or this. You know what I mean? The NFL just takes too dang long to figure out what they want to do. Look at Josh Gordon, that situation. I mean, Josh Gordon had the dirty drug test come back, tested positive again, and it just took them forever, through training camp essentially, to figure out what they wanted to do. And if the NFL's initial ruling had held up, if they hadn't revised the way that they handle drug-related suspensions, Josh Gordon, by the language of the policy, would have been out through next training camp. Or if they had just suspended him initially, he would have come back before training camp. That would be huge. I mean, that basically would have really shot the first quarter of his 2015 season. And that gets me into the second part that I really hate about this, and that is that the NFL has really handcuffed the Vikings by delaying his reinstatement until April 15th, 2015. Free agency is already underway. The league year starts in March. So any team that would be interested in trading for Adrian Petertson and taking on his $14 million plus cap hit is going to have to budget accordingly when they try and go and fill holes on their team. And then there's no guarantee at the end of the day that he's actually going to get reinstated.
Right, and the draft's only a couple weeks after that too. So
right.
Teams are in a bad position.
They are in a bad position, and I think ironically here that the NFL, by saying they're not going to reinstate him earlier than April 15th, I think that they may actually be helping Adrian Petertson out, because I don't think, I've been saying since day one that Adrian Petertson had probably played his last down if he didn't return to the field this year, because he would be released or traded, more likely traded. I don't know that happens now, because I don't know that they're going to get the trade value they want for him. I think they may hang on to him for another season and then try and maybe explore trading him, when his salary starts to reach $17 million, because it just goes up, up, up. So I think by delaying the suspension until mid-April, I think that the NFL has kind of helped Adrian Petertson out in this situation, unless Adrian Petertson is just kind of resigned to the idea that he just does not want to play there, in which case that wouldn't be helping him. But I think at this point, I'll tell you, I thought there was 0% chance Adrian Petertson was a Viking next year. Now kind of looking at the options here, I think the Vikings either release him or they keep him. I don't know that trading him, at least for the value you want to get. I know this is going to come before the draft, But I think the Vikings might end up hanging on to Adrian Petertson next season.
Yeah, and if they do keep him for 1 year, I think the Vikings are probably at the point now they're opening their stadium in 2 years, not next year, but the year after. And I think they probably want to get, kind of like baseball teams do, they want to get that team together and be a contender at that time.
Right.
So it's going to be interesting what they do with
You know,
it.
and as far as how the community is going to react to Adrian Petertson, I mean, if Adrian Peterson goes back to Minnesota, has a 100-yard game, his first game back, they're gonna welcome him back with open arms. I mean, they really will. I mean, he's gonna lose endorsement deals that will never return. Nike's already dropped him. Those are never gonna come back. And to an extent, he's gonna have to kind of alter what he does with himself when he's out in public. I don't see, for instance, Adrian Peterson, maybe he's gonna go above and beyond to try and kind of repair his image. But, you know, and there are certainly going to be some people who will never forget this, will always hold that against him. But, I mean, you've got players that go into prison, they get out, and, you know, it's kind of an afterthought years down the road. And if he shows contrition, if he shows that he's really sorry for what he did, and he performs on the field, I mean, if there's any place that all things will be forgotten, it's in Minnesota, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the place where you can rehab your image, is in Minnesota where you started out.
Look at Brett Favre. By the time he got to Minnesota, he had a lot of baggage. You know, he had the whole thing with the reporter and drugs and everything like that by that time. So, and he was a hero for a couple of years at least in Minnesota.
Yeah, well, there's that too. But the other thing is I get the sense. I mean, I think it's not hard to figure this out. Adrian Peterson wants to make his way down to Texas, I think, eventually, whether it's with the Texans or the Cowboys. I think he wants to get down there. And I think Adrian Peterson maybe, in his mind, might be thinking, okay, well, that's the one state I can go to where I know I'm going to have more people on my side for the way I handled this situation than anywhere else. Right or wrong, I think maybe he's thinking that. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I'm not expecting this appeal to actually hold up. In fact, I think there's zero chance of that happening. Adrian's done for the year, and I think it's really now going to be an issue that's going to stick around again until April 15th when the Vikings decide what they're going to do. And I think, you know, I can sit here and predict. We can all sit on the radio or on television and predict what's going to happen. The bottom line is I have no idea how this is going to go. I would be shocked if we didn't have a better indication of how this is going to go come like February. You know, when the season's over. I mean, the Vikings might even be leaking that out. You know, how they're going to handle the situation, maybe to prepare teams or, you know, do something to try and generate interest in Adrian Peterson. But I think at this point, for me, looking at the team, it's more likely that they hang on to him, they eat that $14+ million cap hit next year, than letting him go for nothing.
Right, and again, like you said, it's because there's a chance they might not get anything for him if they do. Obviously, if they release him, they won't, but even in trade.
A couple other headlines here. Oakland Raiders finally got a win. Did you watch any of that game last night?
A little bit off and on. Early in the game, it was a punt fest, back and forth. So, but yeah, they ended up winning it. They were 0-16 rather, dating back to last season.
Right. Yeah, it was. You know, David Carr didn't have a great game. I think he completed just over 50% of his passes. He found James Jones in the end zone with less than 2 minutes remaining. C.O. Moore and I think Khalil Mack almost got penalized. Did you see this? So on third down, it's like, less than a minute to go, 50 and change on the clock, 50 seconds and change. And they sack Alex Smith, Kansas City quarterback Alex Smith, on third down. I think they thought it was fourth down. I haven't seen any of their quotes, I have to imagine. So Kansas City's getting back to the line because they can't stop the clock. They're out of timeouts. And the Raiders players are in the backfield, like 20 yards behind the field, celebrating. And luckily, Justin Tuck had the presence of mind to call timeout. And they weren't penalized at all, but it was almost like Raiders-esque, you know what I mean?
Right. And, you know, we were talking last night, kind of watching the game off and on, and it was a game that it seemed it was a primetime game, a Thursday game, it was a rivalry game, it was raining, it was in Oakland. If they were going to win a game, that was probably the one last night.
Yeah, I think that was it. I really do. And you mentioned it's been, 16 games, so it's dating back to over a calendar year. The last time that the Oakland Raiders had won a football game. The Jets-Bills game moved to Detroit Monday night. Buffalo received between, 6 and 8 feet of snow last 4 days, something like that. Last I heard, 11 deaths. I mean, that number's probably going to go up, and now they're going to have the issue of flooding. They're going to get all this rain, which is going to melt the snow, and it's just going to kind of compound the problem. So, yeah, just a mess out there in Buffalo. And they were paying fans, I think, what, $10 to come help shovel the snow and then get a free ticket to the game, and now it's in Detroit.
Yeah, they're actually, the NFL is actually giving away games, or giving away tickets to that game in Detroit. So if you're in the Detroit area, you go in and see an NFL game for free.
Yeah, and I got a buddy who lives out there, actually, who is a Vikings fan. He's from Minnesota, and he was able to go see the Vikings-Giants when the dome collapsed.
Yep.
And I'm sure, you know what, if he doesn't have anything going on Monday, I'm sure he'll probably go check out a free NFL game.
Yeah, Detroit's kind of the alternative stadium anymore for
absolutely.
catastrophe.